Where does your family history trace back to? Have you been there? Come with us to Hoghton Tower, the historic castle of my ancestors. You're listening to Travel Fomo, a podcast for people self-diagnosed with wanderlust.
Welcome to Travel Fomo. I'm Hilarie Hoghton, and I'm here with my husband, Mr. Hoghton himself.
What's up?
You're listening to the third episode in our Across the Pond season. So take a second to rate, review, and subscribe to the Travel Fomo podcast from wherever you're listening if you haven't already done that yet. This episode will definitely tip the scale for any of you guys who are just wondering whether or not you're going to keep listening. This episode is going to be one of my favorites.
So this is the one. Huh?
This is the one.
This is the moneymaker.
Yep.
That's a lot of pressure, but okay, here we go.
Tell us a little bit about Hoghton Tower, and then we'll go into the adventure that we went on there.
Basically, to set up kind of what it is, if you are a Hoghton or a Hoghton in the United States, you almost certainly trace your heritage back to northwestern England, where there is Hoghton Tower, which is a castle or a fortified manor, depending on what you want to call it, that is there. It's been there for a long time. It's the way it's currently built out is in the 1500s, but the Houghtons have had land there since for 1,000 years. Wow. So William the Conqueror came over, basically solidifying Britain into a country after he conquers it and then rules. And one of my ancestors fought alongside him and was granted this land where Hoghton Tower was built, and there was a tower built there at that point. It since has come down, and the fortified manor that's built there now, this castle has been there, and the land has been in the family since. And it's up on the top of this really tall hill. At the base of the hill, the drive starts, and it's a mile-long drive.
So cool.
Up to the castle.
Just
and
a straight shot. You can see the castle the whole time. You
yeah.
just drive and drive and drive to it.
Well, and one of the crazy things during World War II, they covered it up because German planes would use the drive to point them to Liverpool. They
Crazy.
would look down and see this drive, and it would be okay, if you line up on that, then you can follow that and it'll go straight to Liverpool. That's how long and straight the drive is.
Wow.
Which was an amazing fact that we learned on the tour that we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
But up on top of this hill, and at one point, the land was owned by the family, they said, as basically as far as you could see.
Yeah.
So you're up on top of this hill, and we took a tour of the castle. You got to go out on the rampart and look out, and you can just see forever. And it was really, really cool. It's still in the family, so it's still owned by the Houghtons. There is a part of the castle that's a private residence where the family still lives, and don't get it twisted. They don't know me or who I am or anything like that. It's not
we didn't get free tickets.
Right.
Or
we don't do Christmas there or anything like that. But so distance, far removed relatives, but they still it's still in the family. They still live there. We saw them out on the property, talked to them a couple times while we were there, which was really cool, especially for me, to hear from Sir Bernard de Hoghton, the 14th Baronet, this, who still holds the castle. And it's now a tourist attraction, so you can go in and you can pay to take tours. They have a tea room there, which was great. We took advantage of that. It's also an event venue, so they have a huge historic barn that they do farmers markets in. You can check them out on Instagram and Facebook and all that, and see kind of a list of their events. People also rent it out for weddings and things like that.
Festivals,
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Filming locations. They do car shows and things like that there. So they've really opened it up to the public so that everyone can enjoy it, and it's just become this really, really cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but getting there was like quite an adventure for us.
Getting there was the hard part for us.
It really was. There's no train that drops you off at the bottom of the driveway
Right,
or
no.
anything like that. So for us, we rented a car and we were
Yes.
coming from Bath. So if you guys tuned into the most recent episode, you heard us talking about how we were trying to rent a car. It needed to be automatic. We were at Hertz in Bath, England, trying to get our hands on the right vehicle. And we finally did.
Finally. Yeah, eventually
yeah.
we got the right car.
Yeah. And if you're staying at a place like Hoghton Tower, they are only open till a certain time because it is a tourist attraction, but it closes at a certain time. And then if you are a guest staying overnight in the only quarters that exist,
Right.
you got to be there before they close.
Yeah, there's one room to rent out. It's basically an apartment that they call the Irishman's Tower.
Yeah.
That we rented out where you can actually stay there at the castle. But yeah, like when
gotta
they
be
close
there.
up shop for the day, like everybody goes home, and if you haven't made it, you didn't make it.
Exactly. So they were getting a little worried for us, but it was my first time driving in another country. I'd been in England before, and so I'd seen other people drive me around, but it was very different. It was very much a group effort. Between you and I, trying to get me to drive us in the right places, but it was super exciting, and I would totally do it again. But then especially, I would say, it all kind of summed up in that wait. Before I go there, before I take us to actual Hoghton Tower, let's just talk about the cornfields that we drove through at one point.
Well, yeah, because you're in the country, and we start in Bath, so in the country,
Right.
and then eventually we make it to like a more highway, what we in America would call an interstate, where there's like several lanes of traffic and it's kind of normal. But we start out in a little village in the country, end up outside of the little village in the country.
The real country, yeah.
And so we're following GPS and taking these like one lane roads through these fields.
And in one lane roads, as in it feels like a one way, and if anybody else is coming, it is just very worrisome what any of us are going to do in that moment.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not designated as one way.
Right.
Like it's a single lane that goes both ways. And fortunately, it was so remote that we never faced the situation where someone was coming.
Right.
Because it's like walls and field on either side, like just outside the mirrors.
Right.
So I really still don't know what
What would
happens.
have happened?
Like
I don't either.
someone backs up, or you both just go home. I don't know
Or
what
you
the
both
deal
run
is.
over some corn. I don't even know.
Yeah.
It was that was crazy, but it was super exciting though, and definitely
Yes.
we got some great footage of us, driving through some of these remote locations. But and then we ended up driving up the driveway and arriving there, and that really was the moment for me that just encompassed that whole day and the exhaustion that we'd felt from trying to figure everything out and get there. And it was all worth it whenever we arrived.
Yeah, we finally made it there. We realized, like, okay, we're gonna make it. Like, we're gonna be on time.
We're minus 5 minutes.
Have
We're
a place to sleep tonight.
Yeah.
Just barely, but we did it. And we turn into the drive, and like we said, it's a mile-long drive up this hill, and the castle is at the top of it, and you can see it from a long ways away, but you're definitely you're staring at it the whole mile going up this hill, and it was just breathtaking to see a castle like that, really the way you would have seen it for the last 500 years.
Yeah.
That there were soldiers garrisoned there and things like that, and you come up this drive with trees on either side. We saw like a pheasant out running around while it was up there, and you make it up to this castle. And for me, it really blew me away because I was so excited to see it, because that's where my family's from and felt this great sense of coming home to a place that you'd never been.
Wow, yeah.
Which was odd but really fun. And a lot of times when you plan a big trip and there's like the thing on the trip that you circle that you're like, this is like the thing.
Yeah.
If nothing else happens but this thing, like it'll be okay. And that was this for me. Like going to Hoghton Tower was that part of the trip. And a lot of times you can overhype it and it doesn't really, you're like, it just wasn't quite what I thought, like things end up that way. This was one of the rare instances where not only did it fully deliver, but it was like more.
That's awesome.
And it was a crazy feeling to come up and know that like for 1,000 years, my family has been here. Like some members of my family have been here on this hill, living in this place.
Yeah.
Which grounds you in a way and like makes you feel a part of a place in a way that I hadn't really felt, especially as Americans, because we move around so much. That's kind of what our culture is based on. At some point, like someone left somewhere and came for a lot of us, that's the way it worked. And even still currently, we move out of our parents' house and we go to college over here and then we get a job and go over there. And a lot of times we're moving around. It's a very common thing. You meet someone and you ask them where they're from.
Right.
And a lot of times it's not the city that you're both living in then.
Yeah.
But to sort of solidify in that way was really cool. And like I mentioned before, they have one place that you can rent out to stay there and actually stay in the castle.
Yeah.
They call it the Irishman's Tower. It's a little apartment. It's 2 stories, and it's what used to be the old barracks, which is kind of cool. It's in one of the, I think it's called like a rampart, like a little tower within the wall. And so these super thick walls with these windows that are cut into these massively thick walls. And it has upstairs is like the bedroom and bathroom, and downstairs they've got a little living area and a fireplace with a kitchen.
Yeah.
And so kind of everything you need.
And it was perfectly remodeled, where
Yes.
you had all of these stone walls and these old windows and all of this historic elements, and yet a really nice shower. Like, thanks for the really nice shower.
Yeah.
And thanks for the nice bed. Like,
Yeah,
nice.
it's nice to wake up in a castle with thick stone walls and be able to walk into the bathroom with heated floors.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's a very cool part of it. But one of the old elements that I thought made it really cool was the key.
Oh, yeah.
And so they handed us this key. We got there like just in the nick of time, and they're like, "Oh, hey, we were worried about you guys."
Yeah.
And we're like, "Yeah, we were worried about us too." But they hand us, we sign the papers or whatever. They hand us the key, and I thought they were kind of joking, like a little bit, like, "Oh, we'll play a prank on the American," because it's this old iron key. Like you would think would be in a castle. You expect someone like a dungeon keeper in a robe to have like a link of like all these keys on his belt. And it was literally the length of my cell phone, metal key. And they hand it to us and it's like, oh, okay, I guess like this is the key. And we go and like, sure enough, it unlocks and locks the door to the Irishman Tower where we stayed. And so every time you leave somewhere, you've got this massive key, which would like ordinarily would kind of be annoying. But when you feel it like clanking around in your pocket, it's a reminder that you're staying at someplace like really cool and like getting to have this really cool experience. So it was awesome. And
That was so cool.
that night, so we got checked in. We walked around a little bit in the courtyard, but it was getting kind of late, and we went to the Royal Oak for dinner, which in the village of Hoghton, which is right there a few kilometers away, this pub called the Royal Oak. It was everything you would want an English pub to be. You walk in,
like a fireplace, and
there's a fireplace. There's local families like getting together for dinner. They've got a bar and like seating. The food was great. I think I had a steak. I don't remember
I don't
what
remember
you had.
what I had.
I think you had some kind of shepherd's pie or something like that.
Yeah, actually, that's what I was about to say. Yeah.
And we had sticky toffee pudding there. That was great.
Yeah.
And
Was that your favorite meal of the whole trip?
we ate a lot of really good meals. That might have been one of my favorite ones. I feel like English food really appeals to me because it's like meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of what I grew up with, like here in America, like meat and potatoes, and really like and enjoy and sort of gravitate towards. So I feel like the English type of food suits me in what I like. And it might have been like steak was really good. The sticky toffee pudding was great.
I just remember you talking about that meal a lot, and one of the things I found so interesting is how you describe being in England and being at Hoghton Tower as coming home, and that it really resonates in so many different ways when you describe the trip. And I've heard you talk about English food and how much you're looking forward to us returning, and the English food. And I'm not a huge fan of English food, but you can tell that it's something that you're like, I already knew that you already liked meat and potatoes. And then we get there and it just confirms that that is almost like literally in your blood.
It really does. Like, it really was strange because I hadn't known, like growing up in America, a lot of times it's like, oh, well, like, where do you trace your heritage back to? And now like the ancestry stuff has become really common. But growing up, I was told, like we're like Houghton's an English name. And so our ancestors are from England, but that was it. And so nothing beyond that. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I started doing research for myself that I found all this out, and that, there's a place and you can still go there. Like, you can go see it and tour at the Hoghton Tower. And so I got really excited about it, and I was just excited to see it. And I thought it would be cool, but I didn't expect, like, I'm an American, like the Houghtons that came over were way, way, way back. So like back to like Jamestown back. So like to the like first colonization. And so I didn't really think much of it, but going there really felt a sense of belonging and felt a sense of like, this is where I'm from, and this all makes sense to me, and I love the weather, and I love the food, and all of it really felt like, you belong here. Like, this is the place that you're from.
That's so cool. That's really cool. I love that. All that from dinner.
Dinner at the Royal Oak.
Thought-provoking dinner at the Royal Oak. I love it.
But then we went back. I think we stopped somewhere and got some, like at a little grocery store or whatever, and got some snacks and some like stuff for us to make breakfast in the apartment the next morning, and went back and waited for the sun to go down, which felt like it was never going to happen.
The funny part is, like, we didn't really think a whole lot about it until we realized the sun is just not going down. The sun is not going down. When does the sun go down? And then it just got later and later, and I think it was like 10 or 10 something.
I think it was like closer to 10:30.
I think so too.
Before the sun went down. We were just so far north, and I hadn't thought, like, it had never crossed my mind that it's summer, you're going to be way far north, like the sun's going to come up early and it's going to go down late.
Yeah, exactly. And thus began one of the longest nights. I wouldn't say one of the longest nights of my life, but the longest night of the trip for me.
Well, why was that? Why was that night so long?
Let's talk about that. Is there something you know about that revolutionizes the way you travel? Can it solve problems and help people around the roadblocks on their adventures? Is it just plain cool? If you have a product like that, we would love to tell people about it. Get in contact with us, and maybe next time we'll be talking about your product right now. One other thing about Hoghton Tower that's very interesting is that it is one of the most haunted places in Britain. And so when you go and you start looking up haunted places in Britain, you'll find Hoghton Tower. And I find that stuff fascinating. And so I'd already been doing my research about like how it's haunted, and I think I'd even had some I think I'd asked some questions to the staff there a little bit about it. And so it's really interesting because some of the staff, I think they have like a book or a journal of some sort where staff writes down their experiences from like haunted experiences.
Right.
They document it in a book because it's so haunted. So of course I'd already been doing my research, and then it was the first night there, and so I had to like go online and do some more research.
Dive super deep in.
Of course. So I did that, and I'd already heard about the woman in the green dress, which is one of your ancestors, I'm sure. I can't quite remember. But supposedly she still haunts the courtyard. So if you can imagine, we were just outside of the courtyard. Basically, the apartment looks down over the courtyard.
Right.
So, great view, right?
To watch for the woman in the green dress. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was scared of that window all night long and would not go near it. So that kept me awake. And I honestly could not sleep. I watched all of The Wizard of Oz and at least part of Far From the Maddening Crowd to try to get my mind off of it. But by that point, I was like really, really could not stop thinking about it. And I think it was like 4 a.m. and I finally started to go to sleep.
I remember waking up at one point and you were watching Wizard of Oz, and I was like, what is she doing?
Why are you doing
What
that?
is happening right now?
That's so funny. But I wouldn't regret it though. It was like so fun to stay in a haunted place, and obviously nothing happened, so
Yeah.
which is even better, to be scared with no real reason to be. So
Well, and you are super into that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. You're always like, oh, then we can go to this haunted place or that haunted place. And
Yeah.
I'm always like, no, we're going there to sleep. Let's not go to a haunted place. But you so you got to like,
I got my end of the bargain.
yeah, you got to be scared and haunted.
But the next day was really great. I mean, I was a little tired, which is why I end up sleeping on most of the rest of the trip. But it's how
I'm just
it
making
is.
up for that haunted night.
Right.
But the next morning was like, it was a great day. Like, we woke up, the sun came up really early at like 4:30.
Yeah.
And so, by then we were like expecting it a little more. Like if you listen to our London episode, like we were startled awake by the early sun at one point, but, the sun came up early and we got dressed and went out and we just went for a walk. We actually ran into, Sir Bernard Hoghton, out there. Like he was like letting his grandkids ride bikes. And
When he had the dog.
Yeah.
What did he have? A lab?
Yeah. Like,
Which we love golden labs.
Yeah.
We used to have one.
yeah, that was really special to us too. Like the labs running around, and we got to talk to him for a little bit. And I got to learn some more family history from him,
So cool.
which was really just, I mean, a priceless thing for me.
Yeah.
And we walked down the drive, and just across the street, there was this, there's just these stone fences with these fields, and there were horses in one and sheep in another. And then the church was right there, and we got to walk through the cemetery. We found a lot of Houghtons that were buried in that
that's
cemetery, which was cool to see. But then we went back, had a little breakfast, and it was time for us to take like our official tour, where we got a guided tour through the castle that was
Yeah.
there, which was really cool. Like so much history there.
Oh my gosh, it was just so cool.
And like a big part of the history there was King James I had come to visit Hoghton Tower at one point. And back then, when this happened, the king coming was a big deal. And it was a prestigious deal, but it was also a really expensive deal because you had to host. And because travel back then is, wagons and horseback and things like that, people would come and they would journey for a while and then stay for several days. And the king was on his way to Lancaster. So as he comes through, he stayed for several days at Hoghton Tower. And one of the things that would happen back then is if you found out the king was coming to stay, you would have to pay to host him. And so some people would actually burn their roof, like set their homes on fire and burn their roofs because it would be cheaper to rebuild your roof than to pay for the king to come and stay. And
so crazy.
Yeah, right? And people would go into debt and end up having to go to debtor's prison because the king had come to visit them.
Yeah. Which happened to the Houghtons, right?
Right. Like they did. And you kind of learn about that on the tour. There's a massive bed that's there that they had made for the king to stay in. And it's in the room that he stayed in, and you get to see all of that. But they also have in the Great Hall, they had a huge feast for him, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's this huge thing that the king's coming. They rolled out a red carpet the entire length of that drive. So a mile-long red carpet rolled out
in that
for the
driveway.
king. Yeah, for the king to come in. And then they serve this food, huge menus. And back then, it was a big thing that you have a little bit of everything so that everyone is able to find something that they like. And so servants would just be bringing in like course after course after course of things, and this massive menu that they had of all this game and fowl and things like that. Well, as you can imagine, sort of a raucous night of feasting and all these sorts of things. King James was so impressed with his steak that at one point, I imagine, like, this is just me putting this into the story myself, but I imagine he probably had a few to drink.
Yep.
Really likes his steak so much that he stands up, he takes out his sword, and he knights his steak. And he knights it, I dubbed the sirloin, which is how the sirloin steak got its name. So if you've ever ordered a sirloin steak, that's where that traces back to. That's where that came from. And it happened in the Great Hall at Hoghton Tower.
That's so crazy. And that's true.
Yes.
That is like, actually, that's not your part of the story. Like,
right. Yeah. That really happened.
Yeah.
And so like you get to, so much of the history is wrapped up in that king's visit, and so much is still there, the bed, and you get to see the Great Hall. The Great Hall has these glass, I think it's like 4,000 individual panes of glass.
Oh, yeah.
And just makes it this incredible thing. They actually filmed some scenes for, I think, season 5 of Peaky Blinders, if you like that show on Netflix.
Yeah, like in the kitchen, and then also in that huge hall.
Yeah, so they filmed some scenes there, and they kind of show you that stuff on the tour. In the Great Hall, there's also a table that's there, and they believe it to be the table that was there when King James was there, because there's paintings of that event. There's paintings of him knighting his steak, and this long table is there in these paintings. And at one point they had to redo the floors, and so they tried to take the table out, and they realized that the table is too long to make the turns it would take to get it out. So they from that deduced that the table was built in that room, and so is the same one from when King James was there, which is another, to me,
so great,
just insane that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah. And like all of the chairs, I thought this was just amazing. They're all so ornate. Everything was so ornate, but the chairs were so ornate that it was like they had the family crest, Houghton family crest, on every single chair,
Yes.
which just blew my mind.
Yeah, like it's everywhere. Very like you could just tell the pride taken in that heritage, and that family seal being such an old one. It traces back to the oldest books of heraldry, like when they first assembled. Okay, here's everyone's family crests. Like it's in those. Like it dates that far back, and just so much pride is taken of it. And the Houghtons served historically in the justice system a lot. And if you did that in your home, you would decorate with an orb.
Yeah.
And so like on the top of a post, rather than, some other kind of design, it would be an orb. And the more orbs that you had were significant and would show your rank or status within the justice system. And
That's right.
and so there are orbs just all over the building and all over like the walls and everything, and they're just everywhere, and you learn that significance of it, which is really cool. Is something that's not just a design piece of like, oh, I like that, but it like there's something there. It shows people something, and which was just really cool.
Yeah.
One of the crazy things, I remember the story of the wig room.
Yeah.
And so,
that was weird.
Back in Victorian times when everyone would wear wigs, they had a room where you would take your wig off and it would be placed in that room. Well, mice would get in the wigs, and occasionally a mouse would die in the wigs, but they which sounds like horrible
Right.
and gross
In itself.
yeah, just by itself right there. But then they went up it because it was a good thing, because they would actually take the mouse and cut its skin off like in the shape of an eyebrow and paste them on their faces in place of the eyebrows. And that was like a highly fashionable like thing that you would paste like mouse skin
Mouse
and
hair
fur,
on your face.
yeah, on your eyebrows.
That's so crazy. That's
Which
really
I don't know if
gross.
you've ever considered a trend like that or something, but you're pretty up on
I'm
trends. Like
pretty
if a trend
trendy.
comes, you're going to jump on board. And so,
Yeah, we're gonna place that one on hold. We're gonna put a pin in it. What else were some of those interesting things that we learned on the tour?
oh, another really cool thing about Hoghton Tower. So the Houghtons were a Catholic family, and when King Henry VIII separated from the Catholic Church, he was trying to drive Catholicism out of England, and in preference of the Church of England that he had set up. And so priests were being hunted down. And in Hoghton Tower, they built within the walls and different places all over these priest holes where they would hide priests. So a priest would be in the house, and if someone were to show up, or they knew that someone was going to show up looking for priests, they would hide them in these secret compartments. And there are several of them throughout, and you get to see some of them on the tour. But the priests would stay in there for sometimes hours, sometimes days,
Oh, crazy.
to avoid being taken out and killed by the
Right.
authorities.
That was really fascinating. And they showed us some of those places where, like, this right here was a priest hole, and this was a priest hole, and we think that was a priest hole. And there was tons
Yeah.
inside, or quite a few, I should say, inside of Hoghton Tower. And something else that was so interesting is we got to go down into the basement, and we got to see different things in the basement, including, like, there's a wall down there that they believe a mummy might be cemented behind. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, so at one point it was a really popular thing. It was like a status thing that if you had a mummy from Egypt, as Egypt was being explored and things like that, like well-to-do families would acquire these mummies. But then not long after that, a rumor started going around that these mummies were coming back to life and, zombie-like chasing people down. as you hear these, mummy stories. And so what a lot of families did was they would just wall off a section. And so there's all these tunnels under the castle that kind of run everywhere, and like the dungeon is down there and things like that.
That's where wait staff would also
Right.
run around.
Yeah, like
Okay.
that's how the staff would get around and things like that. And so they believe that one of the walled off areas, that there's probably a mummy behind that, maybe like looking for someone to eat.
That's so crazy. Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
And the tour was really great. One of the things that we talked about is we wish we could have gone again,
Yeah.
because you're just hearing so much information and so much cool
can't absorb
history
it
of the
all.
place. Yeah, that by the time you're done, you're like, oh, I can't remember half the stuff that I really wanted to
know.
remember.
Yeah.
They also have a huge dollhouse collection there that we didn't get to see. Like, they weren't taking people through it. The time
I really
that we
want to
were
do
there.
that sometime, and I'd like to go back during October and go to their haunted house that they have.
Oh,
too.
yeah, they do ghost
the
tours.
Ghost tours. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that'd be so fun. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could see, I mean, we went during the middle of the day, and you go down in those tunnels, and it's pretty creepy down there in and of itself.
Yeah.
But there was, and so many unique things that you didn't know. Like, they tell you you're going out one way, and they're like, now watch like the seventh step up because it's a little bit different height. And you're like, that's weird. A castle built like so exacting where everything's perfect. Why would one step be a little bit higher than the others? And they explained that it was intentional, that it's a trip step, and it's placed there because if you're from there and you know the castle and someone comes in and is chasing you, you're able to run away from them and run up the step, you knowing that it's there, and then they trip on it. And to help you get away, which is just another like quirky, like kind of weird thing that
I know.
you don't know.
And reminds you that of the era that they lived in, where it was war, it was life and death so much, and it's a
Yeah.
fortified manor, and that's just another reminder of that.
Yeah, and there's so much superstition also in it. Like they would show
yeah.
us like the witch marks everywhere, which witch marks were something that builders and things would put onto place, and they would be like crosses or things like that, and they were meant to ward off evil spirits.
Yeah.
And so all of this time, they're building and just trying to like stay safe from these supernatural, like sort of boogeymen that they like
Right.
believed in at the time. And so the witch marks are everywhere. Like they had several big ones. There's actually a well that you get to see as part of the tour, where like they got their water from, and you get to kind of go down and look down into it, which is kind of cool. There's a priest hole down there.
Yeah.
And then you wrap up the tour by going out into the gardens, which were beautiful in and of
Yeah.
themselves. Within the walls of the castle, these huge, like 3 different gardens. There's a grass maze in one,
Oh
and
yeah, that was
then
cool.
the rose garden with all these roses and stuff. And you kind of get to go up on the walls and the ramparts and look out over, which was a great way to end a tour, because then you kind of got to end it at your own pace,
Yeah.
because you just got to walk the garden and sort of spread out from the other people on the tour and see stuff. And then just kind of whenever you were ready for it to be over, it was over. And that time for me of just being able to walk through the gardens was really cool, because I thought a lot about my dad while we were there, which my dad had passed away a few years before. And before I had actually even found out all of this stuff about Hoghton Tower, before I knew it existed. And my dad had always kind of told me that we were English, and that, that there were knights in our family history, but he didn't know much other than that. And it was really cool to get to be there, and I just wished so bad that I could have taken him there,
Yeah.
and that he could have seen it, and because he would have just loved it so much and thought it was so cool. But getting to do that kind of for him and remember him while we were there, and to be back at our family home and think of him was a really cool memory to me. And you just kind of take those things with you, your experiences and the people of your life, especially significant people to you, and you kind of take them with you when you travel. And so getting to see that, and my dad didn't get to go, but I did.
Yeah.
And getting to do that and think about him while we were there in those gardens and up on the wall, just looking out over all the land and the place where my family's from was really cool.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. It was a great way to sort of wrap up that tour.
Yeah. And while we were looking around the garden, we saw a tree that King George V had planted, right?
Yes, yeah.
And there's a little sign right there. And that's just really cool too. Like the fingerprints of all the royalty there is really cool.
Yeah, a place that so much has happened and had been a significant spot for so long was really cool to see, and like getting to stay there and just sort of soak it in was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And we ended up staying another night. And so we had an opportunity to, we got to have tea at Hoghton Tower.
Yeah, that was great
a formal
too.
tea, which was fun. And
that's one of the things you can do if you're in the area and you can't stay, like you can actually go and have tea there.
Yeah, go on the
which was
tour,
cool.
have tea, enjoy yourself. Yeah. And also there's there's a souvenir shop, which doesn't sound like a big deal to most people, but for, you being a Hoghton, it was really cool to get to bring back some stationery and stuff, and a tea towel and stuff like that with Hoghton Tower on it.
Well, and we also got a print of the menu from
Right.
from when the king had visited and that stuff. So that it's cool to have that stuff.
Yeah. Menu of all the food that you like to eat, right?
And basically, all the things that I would prefer. It's basically a menu to my head and heart right there.
That's what...
But and later from there we went to Lancaster.
Yeah.
And got to see Lancaster Castle and all that, which we'll be talking about in our next episode.
Right. And speaking of witches, you mentioned witches just a minute ago. Well, witches were, the witch trials were a big part of what we'll talk about with Lancaster.
Yeah,
so.
the Pendle Witch Trials, big happenings in Lancaster.
It's crazy. So it still really just blows my mind that your family has a castle. So, and now you know that I love you. I loved you before I even knew that your family had a castle.
Before you knew there was a castle involved.
Right. So now, you know that I really love you, and I just got this great end of the deal.
It's like a bonus.
Married into royalty. Yeah. Basically.
I was beast and all turned into a prince.
Oh man, that was just really cool. And I looking back, and now that they do weddings there, I'm like, well, gosh, I think we're supposed to have another wedding at Hoghton Tower.
Let's do another one there.
Exactly.
Well, we may have to someday.
There you go. Well, thank you guys for joining us for this episode of the Travel Fomo podcast. We are so curious about your own family and whether or not you've looked into them. Where is your family from? What is your family all about? Share it on social media. It's really interesting to merge travel with family history, and you just get a lot out of that, and I think that's what makes this episode so cool. But share your stuff, your stories on social media, tag us. You'll find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube.
That's right. We'll be sharing some of the photos from our adventures at Hoghton Tower that we had while we were there. You won't want to miss those. I think we've got one of the big iron key to our room.
Do.
So we'll put that up there as well, so you can check it out. And if you're ever up there, go run around Hoghton Tower. It's a great place.
Yeah, go stay overnight in a castle. It's amazing. And then tune into our next adventure across the pond, where we jet up to Lancaster, like we said, to tour another castle and then hear about those witch trials. It's going to be crazy.
Yep, you definitely want to be there. So don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Travel Fomo Podcast from wherever you're listening. You can also learn more about us and our adventures on travelfomopodcast.com.
Life is short.
Wander well.